Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a great day. You're listening to the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Tersh. Today's episode is going to be a great one because it's one of those topics that I know very little about. So I get to ask a lot of questions, and you put myself in your shoes, you put yourself in my shoes. If you don't know much about HR, this is going to be a great one for you because I don't know anything about HR. So I'm going to be asking tons of questions here. Today we have Chuck Cooper here with Whitewater Consulting. Really quick, I like to say this at the beginning of the episode, at the beginning of the show, just in case you have to jump off and get back on. whitewaterconsulting.net/SBM. That's our resource today. If you have to jump off before we get to the very end of this episode, I don't want you to miss out on that. So whitewaterconsulting.net/SBM. But with that being said, welcome to the show, Chuck.
Thank you, Tersh. It's great to be with you this morning.
So tell us a little bit about you and what Whitewater Consulting is to get started.
Probably the best way for me to describe kind of what my background is I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina. My wife and kids and our family have all been here for about 21 years. We have really spent the majority of our career working as entrepreneurs. We've been involved in companies from an ownership perspective in the agriculture industry, from the hospitality industry, also in the HR and working specifically with small and mid-sized business owners. So Whitewater Consulting is a company that I started in January of 2019. And our focus really is helping to educate and really help small and mid-sized companies understand their HR options and really try to be a resource for them as they work through the life cycle of their business.
Right. So one of the things I want to point out right off the get-go is that you're not an actual HR practitioner, that you're an HR connector. So can you explain the difference between those two real quick?
Absolutely. So I do not have any formal education in HR. So when it comes to the actual practicing or practicing of HR, I am not a good resource for that. Where I am a very, very good resource is having the connection. So I have a great network that has been developed over the last 20 plus years where we have PHRs and SPHRs. So they deliver the actual HR product or the service. What I do is I just match up and I'm really the conduit between my clients and being small to mid-sized companies and the actual professionals or the expert ones that have the expertise to deliver the service.
Awesome. Yeah. Cause if you're listening to this and you're anything like me, like I don't even know where to get started. And we signed up with ADP, but it was only because they integrate with our CRM. But then the second, it was a happenstance that I met someone at a networking event and they're like, you need to use ADP. And so it's like, okay, I'll start using it because I'm not using anything else. So,
Exactly. And that's why, a lot of small companies, small to mid-sized marketplace, ADP, Paychex, companies like that. I mean, they've got great name recognition, and they've also got a wide range of services that they can provide that add a lot of value to their clients.
So would there be a reason, like, I know that you're not connected with ADP or Paychex or any of those people. Is there a reason we should choose one over the other, or is it tomato type scenario?
It really, for the most part, so both of those companies are great. They're great payroll companies without question. That is where, they are the 800-pound gorillas in the marketplace in that area. I think that when it comes down to, looking at ADP, Paychex, or maybe some other companies in the HR space, a lot of it comes down to what the specific needs and the priorities are for the company as a client. And then also, if you want some personal customization to the service that you're looking for, there may be some other options out there that could be, a better fit for them.
What do you mean by that personalization? Like, because I don't know like ignorance is bliss when you're talking this conversation. Just to foreshadow this conversation, whatever you say is probably going to go right over my head. Uh,
I'll try to keep things down where the rubber meets the road, because I think that's where I feel like we can provide great value, for our clients. And to your point, is that when you talk with small business owners, Tersh, they've got a passion, they've got knowledge on a particular product or service that they're
yeah.
trying to provide to the marketplace. HR is not something that they're passionate about. So, and they really, why should they invest the time and the resources to learn about that when that doesn't really um, drive revenue to the
Yeah.
company?
Yeah. And that's one of the things. I mean, whenever we think HR, we were talking earlier, it's just another, overhead expense. And it's like, how long can I get away without having HR, before I actually have to, bite the bullet and bring this on board. Is there a point in size and that you really need HR? And like, how do you know, like, an employee handbook versus just, hey, this is how we do things? Like, what threshold is that,
That's a great question. And my response to that would be, part of it depends on kind of what the vision for the company is. If you're going to be, 5 employees, 10 employees, and you're going to stay there, you're not going to, grow from, say, 5 employees to 50 employees.
Yeah.
The need for HR is probably more from a compliance side. And then also maybe in some cases, looking at some options around the employee benefits and the work comp, components of it as well. So if you're 5 employees, 10 employees, you're probably just going to be looking just for, I just want to make sure that I'm protected. And I, even with a company of that size, you really do need to have an employee handbook, because of the fact that if there is any kind of legal issue that could arise with an employee, one of the first things that an attorney is going to ask for, or someone on the HR side is going to ask for, is they're going to want to see the handbook that lays out your policies and procedures. And if you don't have that, you're pretty much at their mercy if you're in that situation.
Ouch. So how specific does that employee handbook need to be? Like, you said policies and procedures, but that's not necessarily like our work policies and procedure. Like, this is how you change a capacitor type procedure. This is going to be more
It,
of,
it's driven to the people side of things.
okay,
So it's really, kind of what your attendance policy is, what your
okay,
expectations are, drug testing, those type of things. So, and also making sure that you've provided training for those employees, so that there's not discrimination, so that there's not harassment that's taking place in
gotcha.
within the workforce.
Now, what happens if everything's duly noted in that handbook and they've even signed the back page of the handbook? I mean, does that 100% cover you, or is there still like some, like, okay, you're still going to get in trouble for this,
It definitely offers you a lot of protection if you've given them a copy of the handbook and you've got signed documentation that they've said that they've read it, they understand what's in the handbook. It certainly covers a lot of that liability that you would have as a business owner. I
Mhm.
can't say this is going to cover you 100%, but it's going to give you a lot of protection. So you definitely want to err on the side of having that in place versus not.
So I thought about this whenever we were doing ours. Should we have like a little spot at the bottom of each page where they initial? Because I could see somebody saying, well, that wasn't in the handbook when I signed it. I just wonder about that scenario playing out.
Yeah, again, things taking processes like that and incorporating that into the handbook is definitely another value add, and it also just helps provide more protection to you, because we are in a transition right now as we look at what's taken place since February, March of last year with COVID. There's a lot of new regulations that are coming out, and so there's going to be some more policies and procedures that need to be
Hmm.
included in handbooks, as well as a lot of companies are we're working virtual versus having an office where everybody's coming to. So when you start looking at how the landscape has changed for small and mid-sized companies, that is an area that we are going to, I would highly encourage people to take another look at,
Hmm.
evaluate your handbook, and add those new policies. And with doing so, add that line at the bottom for each employee to initial, so that you've
Yeah.
got proof that they've seen and read every page of that book.
Cool. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with HR stuff because you're more of a connector than you're than HR, but I just figured you know more than I do about that. So what is I guess what is HR outsourcing in general? Like what is that? Can you kind of go into detail about that?
Sure. So HR outsourcing is really, there's a couple of different models that are under that umbrella. And to the listeners, there's the two options that we really focus on are PEO, which is a professional employer organization. You'll see companies in the marketplace like an ADP, like a Paychex, Oasis, Insperity, TriNet, companies like that, that are that's where their focus is providing that HR outsource solution to their clients. When you look at from a business perspective, though, again, when you are starting your company, or if you've been in business for a while, you can look at using companies like that are underneath that umbrella of HR outsourcing to really help mitigate your liability as a business owner.
Okay.
And also, a lot of companies will use the PEO for uh, for the selection of benefits.
Okay.
So, and what they do within that model is the companies are like an ADP, they're taking all of their clients that they have within Total Source, and they're putting
Mm.
them into a basket, essentially, to where they're grouping everybody together. So you have using economies of scale to help lower your overall benefit cost and help control costs from year one to year two.
Oh, okay. So you get that group rate policy basically without having a massive group. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So you can take a company that may have 5 or 10 employees.
Right.
If you try to go to the open market and get benefit pricing, you're pretty much at the mercy of the carriers.
Yeah.
If you go to the HR outsourcing companies, they may take, you may go from a group of 5 or 10 to becoming part of a group that may have 200,000 within their group.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that could really affect the difference. I mean, the added expense that you may incur with joining somebody like ADP Total Source could be outweighed, by the savings that you would get from the insurance policies and stuff.
Absolutely. But that's one of the things that I really would encourage business owners to take into consideration as well, is that there are fees that are associated with becoming a part of a PEO, and trying to get transparency in that pricing oftentimes can be a challenge. So you may be saving $50 per employee on the benefit side, but you may be paying $100 per employee per month for the administrative fees. And
So
so
is it worth that? I mean, I- is that did you ever see a flip flop where you're only paying $50 a month per employee and then you're saving $100 a month?
there are situations like that,
Uh,
but you have to really understand the numbers and understand how each PEO actually goes through about how they go about building their pricing. And again, providing that transparency is really, really difficult for a business owner, for an individual to get access to.
yeah.
That's where there are consultants in the marketplace that that probably have got experience in the industry, and they've got knowledge about how those companies build their pricing, so they can be a great resource for you.
Now, is Whitewater Consulting one of those companies that can do that type of thing?
I've got about 20 years of experience in the HR outsourcing space, and so I can certainly provide some guidance on that. I will
Okay.
say, Tersh, with regard to it, that's one of the reasons that I actually got out of the industry for a while, was because the fact that I really felt strongly that there needed to be more transparency in the overall pricing by the
Yeah.
PEO,
Well, the
and
thing
and
it's so confusing as a business. I mean, we're doing, job costing, inventory, all this other stuff. And then it's easy just to slip that one right under the radar because we're just like all this other stuff we're like, it's just a couple $100. So, is what it is.
But and the problem is once you get into that model, oftentimes if you want to come out of it, it can be a challenge coming back out of it, because there's a lot of things from state unemployment or your SUI rates to your workers' comp.
Oh, wow.
To your benefits, you have to go back and set all of those programs back up. So there are times where a small business owner feels like they almost are trapped into that
Mhm.
relationship once they're into it. And that's where, again, what we try to do is we really try to educate the business owners on what they currently have. And if that's meeting their objectives and their priorities, that's great.
Yeah.
But if they are looking at some other options, they want to make some changes, we can help give them some guidance on some other companies within the industry to look at, because most companies only heard of your top probably 4 or 5
Oh, yeah.
companies in the industry. The reality is there's over 900 PEOs in the US
Wow.
today.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. So what happens if you already have a GL or something like that? I mean, if you already have those types of things in place, is it even worth going and doing this?
So one thing to keep in mind is when you're looking at the PEOs, uh, they're going to be focused strictly on just for example, the workers' comp
Okay.
and the employee benefits. When it comes to the GL, uh, they're not going to have much input on that side of things.
Gotcha.
Uh, but I will say one thing to kind of clarify is that the companies have started becoming much more flexible in their models. So they offer most of the large companies are offering both the PEO model as well as what we call an ASO. So the PEO, professional employer organization, they basically are providing through co-employment, they're pooling all of those employees together to create their large group.
Gotcha.
In the ASO model, the individual company stays as a standalone company. There is no co-employment, uh, but you're basically outsourcing some of the administration for employee benefits, for workers' comp, for HR and HR compliance. And the cost for that is typically less than what it is on the PEO side. So it kind of
Gotcha.
depends on what the mindset of the business owner is as far
Mhm.
as which model is going to be best for them.
Now you have to do one or the other. Is that correct?
Correct. You have to
Okay.
choose and designate which direction you want to go in.
Okay. And so it sounds to me like, based off of just this brief conversation that we're having here, that your ASO is probably going to be for a little bit larger company that has kind of a grasp on their, maybe they even have an internal HR person.
Correct. So, and the ASO typically works really well for companies that may have 20 employees up to 100 employees. And I will say, I say 100 on the top side. The reality is, I've got clients that are using the PEO and the ASO models that are 150 or 200, 300 employees. So,
Oh, okay.
it really comes back to really what the needs of the organization are. So, which model is going to work best. I will say that with the ASO, the one thing that I like, that I do prefer about that model, is when it comes to the employee benefits. Even though you're staying as a standalone group,
Hmm.
you have a lot more flexibility in what benefits are being selected to being
Oh,
offered
yeah.
to the employees. Because when you look at the workforce today, you have everything from the baby boomers on one end all the way back to the millennials and the Gen Z on the other.
Right. Yeah.
Benefits are not always equal to those different generations.
That is wild to think about too, because I mean, when you're thinking about someone who is preparing to exit their career and just work life in general, and then someone who's coming fresh into their work life, their outlook on what they need is completely different. So it is wild to be kind of lumped in together.
Absolutely, and to your point, one of the studies that we have available on the resource page is a blog that contains a case study that was done by a company called Business Solver, and they really talk about the difference in the generations and what's most important to them. Because this was as of a year ago, the uh, the Gen Z and the millennials were really focused on uh, making sure that they had enough. They were more budget focused. The baby boomers on the other end, their main focus when it came to benefits was, I want to make sure I'm protected in the event of a major loss.
Yeah. And
So
I remember whenever I first got into the workforce in general, it was like, I just pure ignorance. Like I didn't know what to pick or anything. And it's really like when I asked, they're like, I don't know. You just pick. It's like, you just pick that. You pick that. I don't know. And I was like, you're not any help. This is not helpful at all.
Exactly right. And so, to your point, that is something that, again, we look at comprehensive benefit strategies for our small to mid-sized market clients, because of the fact that there's been so many changes on the benefit side over the last 5 years, but we haven't really stayed up with the innovation on being able to help educate and provide information throughout the year for our employees to be able to fully understand the benefits that they have, and what does that decision making process look like.
Gotcha. Cool. Is there anything that I haven't asked you here? Because I know I
I,
really could go into so many. I could dig in so many rabbit holes here.
I think that, one of the things that I would want to bring up is, when you look at HR outsourcing, uh, what type of companies really should be taking a look at, or when you look at the companies that do select HR outsourcing, why is it that this bringing them um, to move forward and to become part of a PEO? And there's really a couple, about three different options on there. One is, if you're a brand new company that is trying to put policies and procedures in place, get your HR foundation built. But the big driver here oftentimes is they need to be able to have that economies of scale buying power for the benefits to be able to attract a higher quality
Mm-hmm.
workforce.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So there can be an investment when it comes to those clients. Second set of clients is those companies that are maybe in that 20 to 50 employee range, and they've still got their controller, or they've got somebody in the finance team that's handling HR for them. They don't have a designated HR person. So
Mm-hmm.
again, they can use an HR outsourced solution to be able to provide that compliance to build that HR foundation, so that they're well protected as they move forward. And then the last um, group are the companies where business owners are really beginning to look at, we're going to exit our business, and there's going to be an event where we're going to sell, we're going to transition to the next generation, and we want to make sure that we've got all of our systems built out and solidified. And the people component is a really important piece to it, which can add a great deal of value to the company. And so companies or business owners that are looking to exit 3-4 years from now, they're looking at using a company like a PEO to help solidify that foundation from a people standpoint, to maximize
Does it matter
the value.
that size of that exit, the business owner that's getting ready to exit?
I would say that, if the more employees that a company has, the more value that's going to be
Is there ever a time
recognized.
whenever you put something like this in place and then the company that's buying it is like, ugh, wish you didn't have that?
No. So what happens in those situations is, when that new owner steps in, they basically can obviously make modifications to that model. So they may
Gotcha.
elect to bring everything back in house at that point.
Okay. Okay. Cool. That's good to know. And you said 3 to 5 years. Should we really be thinking that far out? I mean,
With regard to exit planning,
yes, especially when it comes to this.
I think so. I think that I'm working with a group right now, or other providers that are specialized in helping business owners make that transaction and that transition through the exit process. And they're all looking at that window over that 3 to 5 year period. So
Okay.
part of that depends on what size that company is as well. If they're,
Good point.
just a handful of employees, you may not need to spend that much time.
That makes sense. That makes complete sense. And a lot of times, so we've had different business brokers on here on the show and stuff, and something that they've all said was, plan for the end, in the beginning. So if you're planning on, even if you have no intentions of selling, keep building it as if you're selling it. You'd have to sell it tomorrow in case something happens.
Absolutely. With 100% of business owners are going to have, there's going to be an event and there's going to be an exit. It's a
Yeah.
matter of whether you have a plan in place for that or not.
Exactly. Cool. Chuck, I appreciate you coming on. You answered tons of my questions. I'm sure you've answered tons of other people's questions. The best place for them to reach out to you to learn more, to connect with you is?
My webpage is whitewaterconsulting.net. And my email is chuck@whitewaterconsulting.net. So either one of those locations, they're going to be able to get access to me.
Perfect.
And again, Tersh, I would welcome the opportunity just to be able to be a resource and answer any questions that the listeners have. So feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't forget to go whitewater.net, whitewaterconsulting.net /SBM for Service Business Mastery. There's several free resources there. So please do visit that and ask Chuck questions. You could honestly ask me any question you like. I'll give you an answer. It might not be the right one, but honestly, what I'll probably do is just get you connected with Chuck because this is definitely not my forte. And I'm asking people constantly, like Chuck, the questions to this is probably the exact same thing you're thinking of right now. If you ask me, I'm like, oh yeah, I should have asked that exact same thing. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm an open book when it comes to ignorance in this area. So thank you again, Chuck, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Tersh. It's been great to be with you. And thank you to the listeners as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Service Business Mastery Podcast. It is the podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. I hope that we answered some unasked questions today on today's episode. If you're thinking about starting your own business, it's one of those things, HR is one of those things that nobody really talks about. You know, we're great technicians. We start our own business thinking, I'm a really good technician, I can go do this. HR is one of the things that just nobody ever mentions. So I hope that you got some value out of this. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself or Chuck. With that being said, I hope you have a wonderful day and stay safe.